Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast, Global Protests, History or Fad? Of course, if you've been with me, you know my answer to this. I think that this is history in the making, these global protests. This is not transitory. These protests were taking place prior to COVID-19 for a myriad of reasons. They have not gone away. In fact, many of them have gotten worse, or they will be getting worse. And so we are really in the first throes of this global phenomenon. Now, maybe it will prove out it's just going to be a fad. It's just going to be transitory. I don't believe that. And when the dust settles and when people are allowed to go back out into the streets, and even, they're there now. And when the true economic calamity of what's been taking place around COVID-19, and just because of all of the corruption, because of the system itself, and that's what's really important to stress, because this isn't all due to COVID-19. COVID-19 and the shutdowns just made everything worse. What COVID-19 really did is it's starting to reveal the system, this global, unsustainable, corrupt, fraudulent system. And we're going to take a look at some interesting information from the Carnegie Endowment Center for International Peace. But I do also want to talk about, obviously, market performance. And if you've been watching the news today, you've probably heard a lot about journalist Bob Woodward's, his new book that's coming out next week, entitled Rage, a look at Donald Trump's presidency. We'll talk about that a little bit too, because that's going to continue to make the headlines. First, to market performance, we have the dollar index trading at 93.161, down slightly for the day. Again, we're going to continue to watch and monitor this closely. On the share front, there was a nice bounce back today on the major averages. Not because of any type of breaking news, but simply, could this have been a short squeeze? Could those who were selling, are they looking to take profits? Because that's how you close out your positions. If you were selling short, they have to buy those shares to close out their positions. So could this have been a short squeeze, or was the sell-off that we've witnessed, which was extreme, especially in the NASDAQ and the NASDAQ 100, with how quickly it sold off, is this just your typical counter rally? Blowing off some steam, okay, we oversold, now we got to buy back. Could that be the case? Again, this is a process. I'm not here to try to tell you what's going to happen day to day. I don't get into that game. There's a lot of people out there on the internet and with different podcasts and different programs that try to play that game day to day. That's not me. That's not what I do. But we do talk about market performance on a daily basis because it is important, because it's part of a longer arc in that process of how this all unfolds. Right now, futures trading, overnight futures trading, we have the Dow Jones Industrial Average in the red but flat. The S&P 500 is also down about 0.1%, and the NASDAQ 100 is down about 0.25% at the time of the podcast. Cash trade in Japan is up about 0.6%. A strong rally across the pond in Europe, depending on the index, anywhere from 1 to 2 percentage point gain. Cash trade in Australia is up about 0.1%. Chinese markets are also trading in the green, up about 0.3%. On the share front, we have Apple gaining back 4 percentage points for the day. Tesla getting back 36 points, an increase of nearly 11 percentage points on the day alone. But recall yesterday, Tesla lost, I think it was about $88 per share, representing a decline of about 21%. So that was a huge sell-off in Tesla, getting some of that back again today, gaining nearly 11%. Microsoft also was up about 4.25 percentage points. Amazon gained 3.8%. Alphabet, the parent company of Google, gained 1.5%, and Facebook gained nearly 1% to round out the day. On the commodity front, we have WTI trading at $37.80 a barrel, Brent at $40.59, natural gas at $2.39. Gold and silver continue to hold their own. Again, as I stated yesterday, this is looking good from a technical standpoint. From a fundamental standpoint, all of the major boxes are checked. This is a long-term bull market as far as I'm concerned, but technically also looking strong. Spot gold is trading at $1,945 an ounce. Spot silver is at $27.01. Uncle Sam's 10-year Treasury junk note is yielding 0.69%. I just also want the audience to understand, I do call Uncle Sam's bonds, notes, bills, what have you, I call them junk because, in my opinion, that's what they are. But don't misunderstand me. You can still make money, not off of the yield, but off of a potential capital gain, off of the price appreciation that could occur within these bonds. So don't misunderstand me that with me calling them junk, that they're worthless or that you can't make money in them. You can, because the Federal Reserve is buying them up, and some people do fairly well in the bond market from a capital gain perspective. If you're holding these things to maturity with these yields as low as they are, you're not going to earn anything. Once you take out taxes, once you consider and take into consideration the real rates that you're actually getting, it's really just not worth it. But you might make out from a capital gain standpoint. So just some clarification on that. That's some of the market performance. To Bob Woodward's book. This is from his website here. I'm just reading sort of what his new book is about. Bob Woodward's new book, Rage, is an unprecedented and intimate tour de force of original reporting on the Trump presidency. Rage goes behind the scenes like never before with stunning new details about early national security decisions and operations and Trump's moves as he faces a global pandemic, economic disaster, and racial unrest. Woodward, the #1 internationally best-selling author of 13 #1 bestsellers, including Fear, Trump in the White House, shows Trump up close in his entirety before the 2020 presidential election. President Trump has said publicly that Woodward has interviewed him. What is not known is that Trump provided Woodward a window into his mind through a series of more than a dozen exclusive interviews between December of 2019 and July of 2020. At key decision points, Rage shows how Trump's responses to the crises of 2020 were rooted in the instincts, habits, and style he developed during his first 3 years as president. Rage draws from hundreds of hours of interviews with first-hand witnesses, as well as participants' notes, emails, diaries, calendars, and confidential documents. Woodward obtained 25 personal letters exchanged between Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that have not been public before. Kim describes the bond between the two leaders as out of a, quote, fantasy film, end quote, as the two leaders engage in an extraordinary diplomatic minuet. Rage will be the foundational account of the Trump presidency, its turmoil, contradictions, and risks, with the last third of the book focusing on the coronavirus. It is an essential document for any voter seeking an accurate inside view of the Trump years, volatile and vivid. Rage will be published September 15th, 2020, and is available for pre-order at yada, yada, yada. Now, of course, again, that is Bob Woodward's write-up or his editor's write-up of the book. Again, I'm not necessarily endorsing this book, but just letting you know this book is going to make the headlines. It already is. What is gaining a lot of traction in the news thus far is the fact that the president was not only interviewed, but he was recorded. He was on tape. To his knowledge, he knew this. This is not a surprise. He knew he was being recorded. But more than a dozen interviews, I heard as many as 18, and of course over an 8-month period. And the stuff that is getting a lot of traction thus far is that related to the coronavirus, especially early on, where the president is recorded again on tape during one of these interviews with Bob Woodward, that his strategy with coronavirus was to play it down and to always play it down. His reasoning, the justification that the president said, was because he did not want to cause panic. Now, this is a little bit of a head scratcher because the president seems to have no issues making this election about fear and panic. Fear that the protests and the riots are going to get worse under a Biden administration, that actually what is taking place is already Biden's America, even though the president is the president, even though Trump is the president. No, it's not his fault. He has nothing to do with this whatsoever. It's all Biden's fault. Okay? The number of tweets that have been out there and other comments out there, sort of wink, wink, nod, nod to white suburban housewives out there saying, look, if Biden gets elected, there is a law waiting in the wings with Senator Cory Booker. There's going to be federal mandates that are going to state, hey, white suburban housewives, be on the lookout, because there's going to be a federal law that gets passed that allows poor black men to move into your neighborhood. Now, there are so many things sort of wrong with that statement and with those tweets that are coming out there, but that's what he's playing. He is playing on people's fear. That is a panic he is trying to cause to make you go out and vote for him. To protest those issues. If you don't vote for me, or if I lose, it's a rigged election. The only way that I will lose this election is if it is rigged. There are so many things wrong with that comment. A sitting president, a former president, should never say that. But he is. And his side doesn't care. Again, as I stated yesterday, I can only imagine how high Republicans and conservatives, how high your blood pressure would be. It would be at a boiling point if Barack Obama said that same thing. But your guy is completely okay. Causing panic, causing hysteria, causing a lot of uncertainty. Pick your word. It's all the same thing. There's word association. These are all synonyms as far as I'm concerned. But that's okay. But when we have a life and death situation with a pandemic, oh no, let's downplay everything. And he did downplay it. He did. The question was at the time, did he know he was downplaying it or not? Well, we know he was. So that means he knew it was worse than what he was stating. To me, that's poor leadership. This is a government of, by, and for the people. How are we supposed to make well-informed decisions if we are not given the truth, if we are not given adequate information? I mean, all this stuff is on tape. And I'm not just talking about the interview with Bob Woodward. I am talking about other statements that this president has made in regards to coronavirus. Early in February. Middle of February. Late February. Oh, 15 people have it in the Pacific Northwest. They're all going to get better. Don't have to worry about it. Next day, it's miraculously going to go away. Don't have to worry about it. When the weather warms up, it's just going to miraculously disappear. Don't have to worry about it. We deserve leadership where the president of the United States, I don't care what party, this is not just me picking on Trump. This is what we have been dealing with for a long time. This is why we are in the situation we are in. But he is no better. And that's the point. You need to inform people. Just by telling people the truth, you're not necessarily going to cause a panic. Take control, exude confidence, do all those things that you're saying you're trying to do. Well, do them, but also tell the truth. Don't downplay it. Have a strategy, have a game plan. By having a strategy, by having a game plan, and by communicating that with the people, you will give the people confidence, assuming that game plan and that strategy makes sense. But when you do this, when you downplay, and when you say 15 people have it, nobody's going to get sick from here, everybody's going to get better, and then you fast forward to today, we got about 6.5 million cases, about 180, 190,000 deaths. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Even if you want to have the conversation and make the argument that those numbers are inflated, that's fine. I believe they're inflated too. Cut them in half. That's still a significant concern. And it's not going away anytime soon. I stated this at the beginning of the year. when this was going around in China and then when it started showing its head here in this country, what do you have to lose if you're the President of the United States, or any government official for that matter, to err on the side of caution? We could perhaps at that time be in the midst of a global pandemic. What do you have to lose by erring on the side of caution and preparing people for that type of situation? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. But when you come out and you downplay it, when you know that it can be and is likely going to be a serious event globally, well, now you start to call into question your credibility, which has already been called into question many times before. You start to lose that trust, if you haven't lost it already with a lot of people. You had nothing to lose. Now, when you do that, again, when you downplay it, when you try to shrug it off, when you try to be that strong man, when you try to be Mr. Cool, you're setting yourself up for failure. You are setting yourself up for the types of attacks that this president is now going to hit and see head on from now until the election. And it's on tape. This isn't some anonymous source. This isn't some sort of fake news article. This is the president in his words. The question just simply becomes, do you think his reasoning is good enough? Well, I didn't want to cause panic. Well, I just gave you an example, a list of examples. He has no problem trying to cause panic and fear and a lot of uncertainty in people in this country to go out and vote for him. He is trying to paint a very dark picture if Biden and Harris win this election. That's perfectly okay. But you got to play it cool, got to play it down when it's the pandemic. That doesn't jive with me. But we're going to have a lot more stories on this. I think Bob Woodward is going to be interviewed by 60 Minutes this Sunday. So we'll pay attention to that. And if I think it's worth mentioning, we'll have another discussion. But that's something to pay attention to. Now on to global protests, history or fad. This again is from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. They have a nice website up. I'm just going to take the time to go through it here with you. Again, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. This is their global protest tracker. As their website states, it is a one-stop source for following crucial trends in the most significant anti-government protests worldwide since 2017. This is last updated on the 1st of September of this year. About 100 significant anti-government protests have erupted worldwide. About 30 governments or leaders have fallen as a result. 8 out of 12, I don't know why they say out of 12, it would be 2/3, basically about 70% of South American countries have experienced significant protests. That's huge. Some of the most violent government crackdowns against protesters have occurred in Iran, Iraq, and Nicaragua. Now, that's a significant statement when it comes to, well, the whole thing, really, but the South American countries. About 2/3. 2/3 of South American countries have experienced significant protests. That's in our hemisphere. A lot of these countries are heavily dependent on tourism. You already have tourism and travel taking a huge hit. You add the social unrest to this mix, and you got a big problem. And this is not going to work itself out anytime soon. People are still afraid of traveling, still concerned with the coronavirus. Don't necessarily want to travel abroad. Maybe they can't. Maybe they're not even allowed to travel abroad. They definitely don't want to go to a country where there's a lot of social unrest. Now, further down with this global protest tracker, they do a good job of breaking it down. You have a list of all of the protests since 2017. Have it broken down by which ones are still active, large by size, whether they got violent, the duration, the outcome, etc. They give you a motivation breakdown between economic, political, and corruption. Now, in my opinion, in my analysis, and I have voiced this many times before, to me, they're all connected. Now, there might have been a catalyst. There's always a catalyst, and maybe that one issue that really brought people to the streets, that was sort of the final straw. Maybe that was corruption. Maybe that was political. Maybe that was economics. But at the end of the day, my opinion, it's all of them together. But nonetheless, Carnegie breaks it down by economic, political, or corruption when it comes to their motivating factors. But even still, they tend to agree that it's all three. Now, I have up right now on my screen the active protests that are taking place, a list of about 18 countries. I'll run through it real quick. We have Argentina, Belarus, Bolivia, Brazil, Bulgaria, Chile, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Iraq, Israel, Lebanon, Libya, Mali, Russia, Sudan, Thailand, Tunisia, and the United States. Now, I would have to say that most of them are considered economic and politically and corruption motivated. But then, of course, there are some breakdowns where that's not the case according to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Nonetheless, take the time to check this out. You can look at all of the protests, again, nearly 100 countries going back to 2017. You get to see the duration and the outcomes. Of course, some of the outcomes you get government overthrows, you get some resignations, you get a new government in place. Others, ain't happening, no difference, just protesting, just marching in the streets with little to show for it. At least that's for right now. I think there is going to be a lot more outcomes, if you will, in the not too distant future, with a lot more governments stepping down or just being overthrown. If those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. That's what it's coming down to, unfortunately. These politicians the world over, and there's no difference in this country either. We are not the exception, not by any stretch of the imagination. These politicians do not want to give up their power. They do not want to give up their authority. And they're not going to go away easily. I have asked this audience on several occasions to leave the two-party system. I don't care if you're a registered Republican or Democrat, leave them. Register as an independent, unaffiliated, libertarian, constitutional party, Mickey Mouse Club. Leave them. This is a peaceful protest. This is a peaceful revolution. This is one step in the right direction. You have to send a message to these people. You have to send a message to the two-party system. And what you're also doing, especially if you go out and vote for a third-party candidate, you're not just sending a message to the monkeys and the clowns in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, but you're sending a message to a lot of good men and women out there who would like to throw their hat into the ring, but they do not want to associate themselves with this two-party system. And they don't want to do it because these are people of character and of integrity. But they say, I'll never win as a third-party candidate. That's why you have to leave these parties. That's why you have to vote third party, because you can get these people out of the shadows, people who understand the structural issues at play, to take them on head on, to speak the truth, to roll up their sleeves and to do the dirty work that these two parties do not want to do, because they are the dirty business. So you're not just sending a message to the two-party system. You're sending a message to a lot of good men and women out there who are afraid to throw their hat into the ring because they don't want to associate themselves with these parties and they don't want to get thrown in the muck, which is what happens under this two-party system. So please, leave those parties. Leave the Republican Party, leave the Democrat Party. They have left you a long, long time ago. They do not care about you. And again, I have 27 trillion pieces of evidence in my corner. What do you got? Bring it on. You don't like the other side? Please, do better than that. Do better than that. Because if that's your answer, if that's your excuse, you are not part of the solution. You are part of the problem. Couldn't be any clearer. It's in your face every single day. I talk about stuff quite often here before it happens. How can I do that? Because I know the playbook. Because they use the same playbook over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Or are they expecting a different result? Or are the people expecting a different result? That's really what it comes down to. These idiots, they just want to maintain their power. They just want to maintain their position. And that's what the playbook gives them. It's the people who keep falling for it. So leave them. They left you. And you're not just leaving them. You're going back to your country. You're trying to get your country back. And that's not just here in the United States, but that's globally. And that's why these global protests are history in the making. This is not a fad. This is not transitory. Now, you can disagree, and of course, time will tell. But people are waking up. People understand that the global system is unsustainable. That these motivating factors, they are economical, they are political, they are from a corruption standpoint. It's all of them. The question is, what side of history are you going to find yourself on? I'm trying to get on the right side of history. I'm not endorsing these parties. I'm not voting for these parties. I'm not voting for these idiots, these lunatics. I'm done with them. They're not to be trusted. They're not to be respected. They have not earned it. In fact, by their actions and by their words, they've done the complete opposite. You should not trust them. You should not respect them. But I guess the power of getting that little sticker that says I voted on November 3rd is just it's just too much of a rush. You can't pass it up, so you got to go vote for one of these idiots. And then we'll be back in 4 years scratching our heads. Why didn't anything get solved? In fact, why are things much worse? Because that's probably what's going to happen. Hope I'm wrong. Again, you'll never meet somebody who wishes they were more wrong than me. But we keep hitting the nail right on the head. Global protests, history or fad, you tell me. But time will tell us all. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.